Hola from Madrid. I'm Jamie Williams from Islamic Relief Worldwide, and I've been asked to come here to explain about what adaptation is with my friend Patty, and we're going to try and talk around this subject. Adaptation, when things change, you have to adapt. Everybody knows that. You've got to get used to the new situation. You've got to be able to find ways of doing stuff in a different way. You've got to maybe look for new sources of where you're going to get your resources, your job. Adaptation to climate change is a big deal. You can imagine how you really need to adapt to what's probably the biggest change that can happen, which is a change to your whole environment. Adaptation is a really important issue here at the Conference of Parties for Climate Change. It's one of the four legs of the climate change negotiations. Adaptation at this international level really means giving the facilities, the abilities, the knowledge for people to build up their resilience. That might be to do with personal resilience, finding a new livelihood, finding a new place to live, or it might be to do with sort of structural resilience, building a barrier, making sure that the changes that are happening in the weather aren't going to affect you too much, finding another source of water, for instance. This really matters, and from my point of view, it really matters to the people that it affects most. I want to talk about somebody that I met in Bangladesh. In southern Bangladesh, they're faced with two great traumas from climate change. One is the cyclones coming up from the Bay of Bengal, coming off the sea and causing great typhoons. And the other is the waters coming down from the Himalayas, which are melting glaciers, melting rapidly and providing much more water than it's been used to. And the effect for people in this part of Bangladesh is that the land is falling away. Mohammed, I met, he was displaced. That means his home was lost 19 times in 20 years. Can you imagine what that's like? His situation was that the seas were rising up, the land was eroding, all his crops, he was a well-off rice farmer, don't get me wrong, he's not a poor man. He had a family, they were getting an education, they were doing all the stuff that people should be doing when they're striving to make a better life. But then the weather came, and it took away that life. It took away the very land that he was standing on. This is where adaptation is needed. 20 years ago, if Muhammad had had the ability to adapt, had some knowledge about what was likely to happen, and some help in finding ways to deal with it, then his situation, which was standing on the side of a muddy path with his hand out, crying for pennies, would be very, very different. That's Bangladesh.
Yeah, that's right, Jamie. I mean, we need to focus on adaptation and put resources into it. I'm Patty Ferguson-Bohnee. I'm from the Pointe-an-Chien Indian Tribe on the Louisiana Gulf Coast, and our tribe has inhabited this area for thousands of years, and we've undergone adaptation and taken adaptation measures due to coastal erosion, sea level rise, and saltwater intrusion. There aren't a lot of resources dedicated to it, even in the United States, and this impacts people's way of life. We're subsistence fishermen. We rely on the resources that are provided to us to live, and it's part of our cultural heritage. Now, in order to move forward, we need support in order to adapt and to thrive. And there are communities all over the world who are going through adaptation. And so this conference is focusing on the national adaptation plans. And I invite you and all the other people on the Louisiana Gulf Coast to support efforts to protect the coast, because the people who live there are important. We're the first people of this area, and we need that support, and we need support for adaptation.
Yeah, it's all about looking after your neighbors. It's all about looking at other people's situation and trying to do the best for them. And at this conference, the cause for, let's face it, it's about money, because with money you can buy the know-how, you can buy the technology, you can buy the resilience. It's about money, and it's about a swapping of money from those of us that are not suffering directly at the moment to those who are already suffering badly. So that's adaptation for you. It's people getting used to the new situation that they find themselves in, and it's pretty important.
Yeah, and some of the things that we've done to adapt is raise our homes 8 to 15 feet in the air. We recently had an oyster restoration project to protect sacred mounds that are falling into the water. So we worked with local businesses to obtain oyster shells so that we could use traditional knowledge to shore up these reefs. But there's more that can be done, and there could be things done in your local communities, ways to support your local communities. But we need to address this on a worldwide stage.
Yeah. So this is a worldwide stage here. I'm hoping that the people will listen also to the people who are most affected. These decision makers in these halls here have to be in touch with the people themselves, because they really know what alternative livelihoods there might be, what different crops they might grow. They know this stuff, and their knowledge is the vital thing for any adaptation plan. And so that's something that we in Islamic Relief, and I guess a lot of organizations here, are trying to do.
That's right. Indigenous and traditional knowledge is a key to responding to this climate crisis. And so we need to make sure that all people have a voice at the table, especially those most vulnerable communities.
Yeah, and in the jargon it's called community-based adaptation. It's saying that you can't have a government coming down from high and making all the decisions for people. People have to be involved in surveying their situation, in planning on what's going to be done, and putting that plan into action. So this is what we're calling for, and I hope it's been something for you to have a think about and see whether it's important to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.